Alix Timko is here to discuss CRT. Come.
Hi, everybody. Oh, it is hard to see. So just before I get started, how many of you have heard of or know what cognitive remediation therapy is? A few hands. Okay, so I'm going to give you a little brief history lesson, and then if we have enough time, talk a little bit about where I hope some of the research is going. So CRT is an adjunctive treatment, meaning it is not something that can stand alone. It's something that can be done with other forms of treatment. And it's actually been around for about 100 years. CRT was first developed after World War I, and in World War I, a really interesting thing happened. A lot of soldiers got head wounds, and unlike prior wars, they didn't die because our medical care had gotten to be good enough that soldiers with head wounds would survive. And physicians started to realize that head injury actually impacted some of their higher order thinking, they had difficulties in paying attention, problem solving, memory, other things. So physicians at few different parts of the world independently developed something called cognitive remediation therapy, which addressed those executive functioning difficulties. So it helped improve memory, helped improve focus, attention, shifting gears, that type of thing. And CRT is really effective. We still use it today. And over the years, as research went on, it started to get adapted for schizophrenia, psychosis. Individuals started to realize it might be helpful in depression and anxiety. And about 15 years, Kate Chanchuria decided that, hey, this could be really helpful in eating disorders. And what she did is she realized that there's a lot of behaviors in eating disorders that we've talked about today that could potentially be reflected in some types of executive functioning. And there was research to back this up. So individuals with eating disorders can be perfectionistic. Sometimes they can tend to get stuck on the same thing and not be able to get off of it. They may get really detail focused and not be able to see the big picture. And those are all things that are part of executive functioning. So I don't know about you guys, but this is all like normal stuff that we all do. So if I'm really reading a really, really good book, and when my kids comes up, it takes me a couple minutes sometimes to shift gears, stop reading and pay attention to them. In that moment, I'm not shifting gears really well. We all do this with better or worse ability. This is just something that's pretty normal. Something else is called central coherence, and this is our ability to see a big picture. So if you know Where's Waldo, some of us are really, really good at finding that little guy in the striped shirts. Some people really struggle. If you're really detail-focused, you're going to find him really fast. If you tend to look at the big picture, it's going to be harder to scan every inch of that page until you find Waldo. And what Kate realized is that a lot of individuals with eating disorders, particularly adults, because that's with whom she works, really struggle with these things. So cognitive remediation therapy can target this. It's kind of like a brain gym. It really is exercising the brain and building skills, increasing your ability to shift, increasing your ability to look at big picture thinking. And so over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of research done looking at small pilot studies to see, can we increase flexibility? Can we increase big picture thinking? And we can. So what does this mean? Well, individuals with eating disorders who do CRT say that it is really helpful because one of the most important things about CRT is we don't talk about the eating disorder at all. It is doing different exercises, thinking about your thinking. How did you solve that problem? How did you figure that out? What was it like shifting gears and doing something a little bit different? If you always solve something going this way, what does it feel like when you have to solve it going this way? And really having those conversations and fostering someone's ability to think about their thinking processes. So fostering what we call metacognition. And individuals with eating disorders really enjoyed this. Didn't have anything to do with the eating disorder. It gave them a lot of insight into thinking styles and how they approach problems, which could potentially impact how they were doing in treatment. So over the years, we've developed CRT and we've started to use it in adolescence. And we're trying to figure out the best way in which we can use it in adolescence, which is really, really important from my perspective because the vast majority of individuals do develop an eating disorder during adolescence. And adolescence is a period of incredible brain development and executive functioning. These thinking skills are developing during adolescence. And I thought to myself, well, we need to figure out what does malnourishment restriction do to this executive functioning development? How does that impact brain development? So I thought I was just going to find the, malnutrition for adolescent brain development for dummies and get the answer to that question. And I was shocked because what I found was this really fabulous article detailing all the things we don't know about how malnutrition impacts adolescent development, including executive functioning. So I think CRT has a lot of potential to use in an adolescent population because we don't know how malnutrition can impact brain development. Think it can't be good. And CRT can be used to help foster skills, to keep things from deteriorating, or maybe to help keep somebody on track with their development. At least that's what I think. So I think it can potentially be really helpful there. And it can also be a really fun and interesting thing for adolescents to do, which could potentially help keep them involved in treatment, or maybe make them protest a little bit less when they have to come in for treatment. So I think there's a lot of possibilities there. And the nice thing about CRT is that there are people who will argue, well, we don't know if these are state or trait-based things. I don't think it matters. Executive functioning usually reaches adult levels somewhere between the age of 15 or 25. It depends on who you want to cite for that number. But we also know that the brain has this incredible capacity to grow and develop over time. I mean, luminosity has made like a lot of money on that, right? So I think we can have change that happens over time. We just need to figure out the best way to do it. The other thing that's really great about CRT that can be helpful is that this is something that people can do while they are ill, because this is literally thinking about your thinking. So do I have still another minute, or how am I doing?
You have, it depends on if you want questions.
Okay, let me give you one little quick example. So are you all familiar with that illusion where you have like the old woman and the young woman, and you kind of have to like flip back and forth? Okay, so not all kids are, but some are. So if you think about the first time you saw that illusion, think about who you saw first, the younger woman or the older woman. And then think about how you figured out which one that was. And then think about how hard was it to find the other face. Some people find it really easily, some people really struggle. And how did you figure out where that other face was? And once you saw that second face, could you go back to the first one, or did it take some time? And if you could go back to the first one, how did you do it? Did you have to focus in on a feature? Did you have to take a step back? Did you have to look at it sideways? What was that like? What are ways that you can try to find that easily? How quickly can you switch back and forth? And do you ever find you have to do that kind of thing in your real life? What about back in middle school when you were doing homework? Anything like that? Or trying to figure out what somebody meant when they were texting you? Well, we didn't text when we were younger, but our kids do. So those are the kinds of questions that we would ask in CRT to really think about their thought process and then link that back to how they deal with things in everyday life. And I think that has potential for treatment down the road, and certainly for preserving skills that are supposed to be developing during adolescence. So I think I'll stop there, and I'll take any questions if there are any. Yeah. You come over here, it's a little easier to see.
A few years ago, I heard about CRT, and my daughter was in a pretty rigid place. And I looked, and I couldn't find it available anywhere. So it seemed like a great idea. Is it hiding somewhere, like with occupational therapists or something else? Or is there another way it can be more accessible?
So I would love to make it more accessible, and I have a lot of ideas about how to make that happen. The technology is actually more complicated than you would think. It does hide, because I've actually found out about it. AED, I found out about CRT programs that I didn't know existed, so I'm really excited. So I think they're hidden in different pockets and treatment programs, but broadly speaking, the vast majority of people don't know about it, don't know how to do it. Kate Chanturia has a fabulous website that has a lot of the manuals that were developed in Great Britain. Not all of those work for our kids. We had to do some adaptations to the manual to make sense for kids in the United States. Some things just don't quite work the same in terms of like frames of reference or tasks or things like that. But it is hard to find, but there are some programs that do have it. You just have to ask for it, and I wish we had a centralized list. So I'm sorry, I don't have a more hopeful answer to that question.
Could you spell her name?
Pardon? Oh, sure, it's T-C-H-A-N-T-U-R-I-A.
All right, we have a question over here. Over here.
Briefly, the difference between CRT and CBT.
Oh, vastly different, yes.
Okay, and in relationship to DBT, I guess, all these alphabet names.
Yeah.
I numb myself with the DVD.
Okay, so DBT and CRT are psychotherapeutic approaches, cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectical behavior therapy. The easiest thing to think about CRT is it's kind of like training. So cognitive remediation training. It is very focused, very specific on very certain types of higher order thinking skills. So how you think about your thinking. So it doesn't deal with anything else. So one of the easiest ways to describe it is it's used today for veterans who have had a head wound or head trauma in the military, and there'll be very specific tasks that they can use to increase their focus or attention or working memory. So that's the kind of thing that it is. And CRT is very tailored to specific profiles, and so we have them very specific for eating disorders. So CRT for eating disorders will look different from CRT for schizophrenia, for traumatic brain injury, and so on. CBT and DBT are full therapeutic packages. CRT should never be done all by itself. Anything else?
Thank you so
My
much.
pleasure.